Hello there, and welcome back to Writing from Scratch with me, Tom. On today's video, we're talking all about spelling and grammar. Spelling and grammar can often be something that is worrying for a person who is new to writing or doesn't have a professional or academic background in literature or creative writing. So today, let's look at a few different ways that you can put that concern to bed and not worry so much about your spelling and grammar. First, you should try to understand that spelling and grammar aren't what make a book great. The story, the characters, your research and planning, the arc that your characters go on, the development of different characters, these are what make a story impressive, interesting, and immersive for your reader. I guess what I'm trying to say is that your energy should be focused on activities that actually make your book great. Of course, spelling and grammar will be an issue later down the line when you're going to publish or editing, but to begin with, when you're writing, when you're planning, your energy should be focused on other things, and spelling and grammar shouldn't be your priority. You can worry about that later. Second, editing is where you're really going to focus on spelling and grammar. Initially, as I just said, you want to be focusing on the production of your book. But once that's done, or once you're in a different stage of your novel, editing is going to be really crucial. This is where you're going to comb through every word, every page of your book to find errors and mistakes. This can be quite a boring process, and it's not something that's particularly fun and that you're going to have to do many, many times. But this is where your focus should be on spelling and grammar. So if you're at that stage already, just remember that editing is the time to be looking for those mistakes that you've made already. Importantly, you need to remember that editing is not reading. You are looking for errors, not trying to enjoy the plot. Keep that in mind anytime that you are editing. Most publishers, in fact, require that your novel, especially if you're not established as a writer, should be perfect in terms of spelling and grammar. So we need to make sure that we're taking the time to do these edits. My advice here is to do spelling and grammar edits in small stages, rather than waiting until the whole book is finished. Schedule some time in your writing diary to spell check 2 or 3 pages. You don't need to do lots because it can be boring, but checking regularly will stop the work piling up at the end. Third is about making notes of your most common spelling and grammar errors. Now, this could be a really uncomfortable and boring activity to do. So the best way to think about this is as an investment for your future writing. By doing this and being self-aware of what your common errors are, you will be a stronger writer in the future and be able to avoid or not even make those mistakes at all when you're writing your next book, or you're finishing a chapter, or you're making your next draft. Be honest with yourself and take steps to improve those weaker areas of your language. We all have them, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. So for example, an error that I consistently made when I was writing was confusing similarly spelled words such as peak and peak, and these were errors that weren't being picked up by my spell check that I had to find myself. Fourth is continuing on from the example that I've just given. Be very careful about words that have similar sounds or spelling. Quite often, you can even overlook these in editing too, as your brain filters the errors and assumes it's correct. Examples are words such as stake and stake, see and see, affect and effect, choose and chose, loose and lose. You need to be aware that there are many words that are commonly confused for one another, and when you're editing, you should be hunting for these. Don't allow your brain to gloss over the words, and most importantly, remember that editing is not reading. Fifth, in terms of grammar, I recommend using short and simple sentences, as we discussed in our Less is More video. This is because it can keep your writing focused and concise, and making sure that you're looking at the plot and the characters rather than being distracted by complex grammar structures. In later drafts, once the story is drawn up and the details are in place, you can introduce more complicated grammar to vary the structure and the tone of your book. Of course, if you feel comfortable using more advanced grammar from the start, then you can go right ahead and do that. But for those of you who are concerned about making mistakes, keeping things simple will help with writing. Sixth, and finally, a really big recommendation and the best way to find spelling and grammar errors within your work is to have somebody else read it. Now, this can be really daunting, and if you feel self-conscious about your work, the best way to imagine this is that eventually, if you want your work to be commercially successful, other people will have to read it. It's better if it's an editor who's a professional at doing this job, or a family member or friend who you can trust to give you honest feedback. This way, you don't have to feel as self-conscious about giving your work to other people, and it can help you find and identify those errors and mistakes that you're making that your brain just isn't identifying when you're doing your own edits. For me, I've been using my family members and friends, and it's been so helpful to find those little errors that I didn't know I was making. So this is a big recommendation from me, and good luck with trying to get people to read it. So I hope those 6 tips are useful for you in improving your spelling and grammar, but the main one that I really want to reinforce is the first one. Don't stress and don't worry too much about spelling and grammar mistakes. These are always things that can be edited out later when you go back over your work. Your focus when you're producing should be on the story, the background, the research and the characters, and developing an interesting narrative for your reader. The spelling and the grammar, that can come later. But for those of you who are concerned, I hope these 6 tips are helpful. So please consider liking, subscribing and sharing the video with your friends, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.